this a little bit better, I suppose, is news. L.J. Scott coming back for his senior year at Michigan State. After the game, he made it official, talking to Fox Sports' Jenny Taft. He announced he will return for his senior season, coming a bit of a surprise as Scott didn't take a whole lot of time after the game to sit down and think about his decision. He seems to think he can improve on the field and improve his draft stock, apparently. Well, he thinks he can help the Spartans achieve bigger things next season. He's been the feature back for the team since beginning his career in 2015.
Good. Good for him.
Right.
Get that education.
Right? Yeah, good. Well, it doesn't have to do with education. Doesn't have anything to do with that, let's be honest. It never does.
No, it's good to see that, they keep holding out, get that sheepskin. I did stuff like read, and then
Absolutely.
Candice, how was your holiday? Oh, wait, glad you asked.
That's right. My bad. How was your holiday?
Oh, no, that was pretty good. I had an opportunity. There you go. We're working on this banter. I had an opportunity to just hang out with family. Spent the entire day with my baby brother. And so we kind of traveled from one aunt's house to another aunt's house, and we got a chance to go to the movies and just hang out because he's always at work now. So never see him anymore. But
hard-working brother.
He is.
That's a good thing.
Nah, he's got to become a millionaire so I can see him more. But I had an opportunity to just kind of hang out with him. So
That's good.
Fun times.
Absolutely.
We have a very good show this evening. At some point, we do want to do a 2017 recap of some of the most interesting headlines that happened since we are just days away from 2018.
Wow, we're at the threshold.
Just days away from
it.
Yes. And so we do want to do a recap of some of what we consider were big headlines or interesting headlines. And then also, before we get into that, though, I do have a couple of quotes I want to read to you because some of the things that you were talking about last week when we were discussing economic empowerment. So I came across some quotes, and he has not had a chance to hear these quotes because I want to see the live reaction. I want it raw. So here it is. The first quote I have is, "I want black people to engage in, not in searching for rights, but I want them to search for resources. There's a major difference. Because there is no power in civil rights, there is no power in social integration. Both of those are weakening processes. If I pour water into gasoline, I didn't make it any stronger, I made it weaker. That's why nobody else comes to this country looking to socially integrate and looking for civil rights with black people. So that's the bottom line."
That sounds like Malcolm X.
It's not Malcolm.
It's not Malcolm.
It's not Malcolm.
That was Malcolm-esque.
It's not Malcolm.
Who was that? Stokely Carmichael, aka Kwame Ture.
You gotta come a little closer in history.
Closer?
Yes.
Al Sharpton?
No,
I'm just saying, got love for Reverend Sharpton, but it wasn't Al Sharpton. Hold on, who else could it be? Not Dr. Claude Anderson. See, I see what you did. I got his books here. Wait a minute. You hit that from me in the book.
Right, exactly. We got another quote for you. Only 2% of all black folks in America work for their own community, for their own people, producing comfort and products for their own people. You have not moved one iota in 140 years in terms of employment. Our people still do not understand that you cannot enrich yourself working a job. A job is not designed to enrich you. A job is designed to maintain you, to keep you 1 week away from welfare, unemployment, and the food stamp lines. If you want to get rich, you must move into a business and business ownership. Business will transfer and redistribute wealth 6 to 8 times faster than working a job. The only way you are going to get rich working a job is if you steal.
Is that Dr. Anderson again?
That is.
Wow.
That is.
Wow. Let's go back to the
very first
one. Yeah,
good, because I want your take on that. And it just says that I want black people to engage in, not in searching for rights, but I want them to search for resources. There's a major difference. Because there is no power in civil rights, there's no power in social integration. Both of those are weakening processes. If I pour water into gasoline, I didn't make it any stronger, I made it weaker. That's why nobody else comes to this country looking to socially integrate and looking for civil rights with black people. So that's the bottom line.
Wow, that's a great quote, and there's a lot that's packed in that quote. The first thing that comes to mind for me is one of the unintended consequences of the civil rights movement. Certainly, the civil rights movement had transitioned into the Black Power movement, but when you go back to the civil rights movement, which was spearheaded by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his cohorts, I think that the emphasis that was placed upon integration had an unintended consequence, and one of the unintended consequences was that it appeared as if we put less of an emphasis upon economic empowerment. I know that Dr. King was concerned about that too. He addressed that as well, but certainly one of the other major thrusts of the civil rights movement was one for inclusion and integration into the fabric of American society, and I think that we went whole hog into that. You got a point here?
I do not. I just wanted you to hold off for 1 second because they're having a hard time finding us on Facebook. Oh, yeah? So I want to make sure that we are up on Facebook. I know that we are up on YouTube at Spectacle TV, but I do want to make sure that we are up on Facebook. Paul, we are up on Facebook. Okay, so you should be able to find us on Facebook. Go ahead with your point. Sorry about that.
Yeah, there's a delicate balance with regard to this point, and I'm trying to define the right way to put it. But certainly one of the unintended consequences, as we said, was we put more of an emphasis on integration as opposed to ownership and black economic empowerment. And there's a sense of irony here, because prior to the contemporary civil rights movement, based upon necessity, we as a people had to form our own economic enterprises based upon the system of Jim Crow, right? Based upon the system of imposed by the system segregation. And because of that, we developed our own schools. We developed our own small businesses and whatnot, our own stores and things of that nature, our own barber shops, hair salons, and first, in fact, correct me if I'm mistaken, but was not Madam C.J. Walker the first black millionaire in America? Certainly the first black woman who became a millionaire in America was Madam C.J. Walker, right? So because of the reality of Jim Crow segregation in American society, we had to, based upon necessity, develop our own economic systems and resources and businesses, and that became a positive for us. But think about this, Candice, and I'm slow walking his quote, right? Because now Jackie Robinson was credited with breaking down the color line for Major League Baseball, correct? But prior to that taking place, there was a Negro League. Was there not a Negro League?
There was, yes.
Now think about this. Jackie Robinson, after that tremendous feat that he had undertaken, whereby he, through his persistence and his stalwart personality and being driven to the place where he challenged racism, he challenged that system, and he was credited with tearing down that wall. But the question is this: what happened to the Negro Leagues? 5 years, 10 years after he tore down the color line, what happened? It ceased to exist. And think about that now. I'm marrying this point with the quote that you just read a couple of minutes ago by Dr. Claude Anderson, right? Whereby he was saying that we need to put less of an emphasis on seeking rights and put more of an emphasis on seeking resources, and then link that with the statement that we just made here, that one of the unintended consequences of the civil rights movement was the fact that we began to put more of an emphasis on social integration. The irony is this: you cannot have a civilized nation, a nation which purports to be a democratic society, and that nation actually practiced barbarism. You cannot have a nation that is supposedly based upon being the land of the free, the home of the brave, and so forth, and then practice American-style apartheid. You cannot do that and be viewed as a saintly nation or a righteous nation. No, you are a barbarous nation practicing a barbarous form of brutality. Plain and simple. You can't have that. You can't have it both ways. You can't have it both ways. So it was right for us to tear down the system of Jim Crow segregation. No question about that. It was right for Dr. King to do that. It was right for Rosa Parks to do that. It was right for Ella Baker to do that. It was right for Fannie Lou Hamer to do that. It was right for all the freedom fighters to do that in order to make America become what it professed to be on paper. Right? But I'm standing in league with Dr. Claude Anderson, right? Because this fight, and we both know this, is an ongoing fight. It's an ongoing battle. We've seen recently that we cannot back off and let up the pressure, because those reactionary forces will try to take the very rights that we have. But I think in addition, however, to towing the line with regard to our human rights, we also need to toe the line in terms of seeking those resources that Dr. Claude Anderson was talking about. What do you think about that?
I would agree. I think that you have some people that would argue kind of what you've been saying, but to a much heavier extent of the fact that perhaps not segregation, but integration was one of the worst things to happen to black people, because it took away, I guess, a burning desire they had to build their own. It took away opportunities for us to have instances such as Black Wall Street. It took away the desire to do that and forced us more into a mode of wanting to assimilate. We talked about this last week of people wanting to be American.
Absolutely.
And not wanting the qualifiers that come with it, wanting to just be one. And I think that when that happened, we forgot that we were still dealing with a system that was not built for everyone in America. And so we stopped challenging the idea that everyone, regardless of skin color, is American because we were born into this country.
Absolutely. And you're right about that. I think, and that's the nature of the problem there. One of the terms that we made reference to on last week was this term referred to as NATO alienation, that was created by a brother by the name of Orlando Patterson, and it's the process of de-Africanizing black people. It's the process of ripping a child from the breast of the mother, and in this case the mother was Mother Africa, as we made reference to, and we're making reference to our frame of reference. Certainly we are American people, but at the same time, just as everybody does, we have our own unique narrative, our own unique history, and our own unique heritage as well, prior to having been brought here to the shores of America.
Right. And I guess the biggest thing, because again, we talked about this last week, of America being this melting pot, and you know, everyone being welcome regardless of whatever their circumstance.
Is it a melting pot?
And so, no, but this is where I'm going with this. But it seems to be that well, not currently, but in recent past, we'll say recent past, that was the case for everyone except for darker skinned people, except for black people. It seemed like that when it came to that, it was the only thing that was pushed was assimilation. It was, we took you away from your land. So we took you away from your history and your knowledge of self. We took you away from your language. We gave you our language. We gave you, and I kind of agree with Carter G. Woodson of, I find it interesting that black people would allow their oppressors to be the one to educate their children.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so,
absolutely.
It's just interesting that when it comes to black people, those same things of you know, come over here and we'll accept you and we want you, it seems like there was, that acceptance was never there to begin with.
Yes.
You weren't brought here, and I'm using the correct words, you were brought here to be property, not people.
Oh my goodness.
And so now that property, which for all intents and purposes, we'll say that's not actually living or breathing. Keep in mind that we're often treated as though we are not living, breathing humans. So now that property is trying to be people, they're having a hard time tweaking their mind to that. They're having a hard time. And so I think that's why you have so many times you have these false narratives of all black people being crooks, or them being thugs, or everybody only wanting to rap, or and I'm not knocking people that want to rap, or everyone only wanting to play sports, or only being good at athletics.
Stereotypical imagery.
And so I think it's easier to keep pandering to those images, so that when stuff happens, such as someone getting gunned down and being left in the street for hours, like an animal, that is normal, because then the narrative becomes on the news, oh, they were stealing, or they were doing this, or they were doing that. And I think that so much humanity has been stripped.
And you know what? And that's a great point. And I think that that has happened on both sides. This happened on both sides, right? When you talk about the stripping of one's humanity, it not only strips the humanity of the victim, but it also strips the humanity of the victimizer.
I agree with that.
You know what I mean? Because you can't keep a person in the pit unless you down there in the pit with that person in the first place.
You have to stay down to hold them down. You have to.
Absolutely.
You have to.
But the point, I know that we also agree on this point, is that we have to embrace our agency as men and women. as free men and women, we have to embrace our agency.
I think, and this is the thing, the conversations that we need to have. I think that sometimes freedom is a hard concept to wrap your mind around. Let me go to this other quote, and yes, Candice is full of quotes tonight. Let me go to this other quote that I was like, man,
yes,
this is like right on the head. It's the essence of power is the ability to define someone else's reality and make them live according to that definition as if it is a definition of their own choosing.
Yes, absolutely, I agree.
That's what that reminds me of.
Wholeheartedly,
is that quote, and that was by Dr. Wade Nobles.
Yes, absolutely. That's a great quote.
And when I think of black people, now when I think of economic independence and why we tend to shy away from it and why we're so scared of it, I think of this quote.
Okay. Read it one more time.
The essence of power is the ability to define someone else's reality and make them live according to that definition as if it is a definition of their own choosing. Meaning, I bring you here, I tell you to assimilate to my culture, I make you believe that you're less than. But then once you have what you think are rights, or I've given you some rights, then the very thing that I've given you to begin with, you keep choosing as if it was your choice to begin with.
Wow. Well, that quote is similar to Dr. Carter G. Woodson's quote, right? From his book, The Miseducation of the Negro, essentially whereby he's saying that if there's not a back door, that person will create a back door based upon his or her mindset.
Yes, because that's what their teaching
absolutely
calls for.
Wow. So I see a pattern here. Last week and today, we've been talking about or alluding to consciousness, right? The role that consciousness plays in our development as human beings here in this country and in this world. Consciousness, the significance of consciousness, right?
And I think that we've been so busy with shying away from who we are because, again, there's a mold that we're trying to fit that it's almost a scary thing to be conscious.
We're in the Matrix again, huh?
Oh, yeah.
We made reference to the Matrix on last week. Remember that fake steak that character was eating in the movie The Matrix? And he even realized that he was eating a fake steak. The background was fake. Everything was fake. The props were fake. The very food that he was eating was fake. But he knew it. He knew it. It's not as if he did not realize that he was taking part in an illusion. He realized that he was taking part in an illusion, and he enjoyed it. What does that say about the mindset of a person or the psyche of a person?
Cognitive dissonance. Another quote. I have another quote for you. Listen. You just followed in line with all these lovely little quotes. Cognitive dissonance. Sometimes people hold a core belief that is very strong. When they are presented with evidence that works against that belief, the new evidence cannot be accepted. It would create a feeling that is extremely uncomfortable called cognitive dissonance.
Absolutely.
And because it is so important to protect the core belief, they will rationalize, ignore, and even deny anything that doesn't fit in with the core belief.
Wow. You're full of quotes tonight, man. That's a great quote. That's a great quote. You're right.
See, I was reading all week. I was like, you know what?
Reading is fundamental, ladies and gentlemen.
I said, I have time. I'm going to go to the library. And I just thought, what would Vic do all week? Just read. Just read all week.
But I want to go back to an earlier point that you were making about freedom, that freedom is not free. And there's a difference, there's a cost factor that goes along with freedom, right? And I like to link that to the idea of ownership. Home ownership versus renting. There's a difference between the two. If a person is a home owner versus a renter, when a person is a renter, the landlord is taking care of the property,